Welcome to yet another episode of Shortcast over Coffee. As you all might already know, I have a keen interest in public policy, governance, and economics, which makes me super excited for this two-part episode with Meghnad. Meghnad or Meghnerd on YouTube is one of India's most recognized political commentators and analyst. Now an independent content creator, Meghnad was a writer and a journalist for Newslaundry. His show for them was called Consti-tution, is filled with wacky humor along with a lucid explanation of things you missed in your civics class. I highly recommend you all check it out and I will leave the link in the show notes. Before Newslaundry, Meghnad was a part of PRS Legislative Research, where he worked as the legislative aide for many members of the parliament across various states in India. Like I said, this is a two-part episode, and in this part, I will talk to Meghnad about his journey to be an independent creator and important happenings that led him here. By the way, I get to grow a lot as a person doing this podcast, but it also involves a lot of research behind the scenes. So it would be lovely if you could support this podcast with a cup of coffee on buymeacoffee.com. Link in the description. Do share and spread the word among your friends and family too. So without further ado, let's get into the chat room with Meghnad. Hi Meghnad, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, hi.
Um, Meghnad, I was looking you up and I saw that you did a bachelor's in commerce from Nagpur
Yes,
University,
yes.
and then you did something pretty unique. Not the kind of things that usually a commerce graduate would do. You were legislative aide to members of parliament right after your
Yes.
undergrad. Interesting transition. I haven't met many people who have done that. So, walk me through that. How did you get into it right after degree in commerce?
Mostly desperation. I was doing a degree in commerce because I was also doing CA with it. I cleared two exams and the two 1.5 exam actually, not two, and I was really bad at it honestly. So I did like 3.5 years of articleship, which is the mandated thing for becoming a CA. I completed that, but while I was giving exams, I just didn't like it. Yeah. And this fellowship opportunity came across, like one of my cousins in IIT sort of shared it. And I was like, what is this legislative assistance to members of parliament? This was a very unique thing. Nobody had ever heard of it. And ours was the first batch. So PRS was also experimenting with this essentially. They had no idea what will happen. So I just applied, got through the interview, got in the fellowship, and told my parents that, listen, I got this and I'm going to Delhi. They were a little scandalized because working with politicians is a little no in middle class families. We come from a very, how can I say, privileged upper caste, middle class Marathi family from Nagpur, and conservative approach, do a job or get into like a profession like a CA, doctor, engineer, the whole 90s story.
Oh yeah.
And engineer. And so I kind of resisted that a little bit because also I wanted to kind of get out of Nagpur, and this opportunity just came along, which was like, go to Delhi. I was like, yes. So I jumped on it. No clue what it was. No clue about how parliament works, honestly, or government works. Got in. They took me through a 1 month training, right? And during the training, also I realized how ill-equipped I was because I had no knowledge of civics, just general basics, because I never paid attention in school. It was like
Yeah,
a,
that's what I was gonna ask. Because you jumped right into it after your bachelor's, I thought you
yeah.
had some interest in civics, public policy, governance, concurrent list, and all of that. While in school. So this is quite surprising.
I was surprised as well, honestly. I mean, I also asked them, why did you take me? Right. And of course, they gave me no real answer. But I was very interested in the news. Right. So, what I had done along with my commerce degree was I was also working with Times of India as a freelance journalist during that time. And I had covered crime, education, just local level stories for about 1.5 years, right? And this was like an on and off thing. They treated me like an intern and essentially freelance money, very little money, whatever got published. So that sort of also like crystallized a little for me that I'm a good writer, because I feel like that is one of my biggest strengths and it has been forever. And I keep trying to improve on it. And I feel like my essays that I had sent to them, my just general abilities to think critically, I guess, because of my work as a journalist, maybe that sort of gave me an edge, right? And I mean, I was following the news, but again, when you follow the news, you don't really know what is happening in policy, parliament. It's like it's sad to say this, but it is true, how government works, etc. But one thing that I was very clear was that, I'm getting into this new thing. I'm getting into um, you know policy making, so I need to learn it from scratch now. So the first thing I did when I got into training, and day one when I got like super overwhelmed, was that I went back to my 8th, 9th, 10th grade civics books and I read them, like all of them, one after the other, and got like this basic knowledge, at least, which is a child level knowledge. And I started building up from there. And like big props to PRS for turning someone like me into a legislative aide in a month. It's actually quite grueling. The training was insane. Like we had like super sharp deadlines, like give a brief in 3 hours, read a bill, analyze it, give it in 2 hours, and write a speech, do all these things. So yeah, the training helped a lot.
Was was writing part of the interview process?
So they had to give, we had to give essays, right? Like, why do you want to do this fellowship? The usual fellowship essays, right?
Uh,
What do you want to do after this? Why are you doing this? What is your interest in this? So all those things.
yeah. So for people who don't know too much about PRS, could you just give all of us a 101 on
So,
a what the institute is and
mm,
what they are grooming
yeah.
people to become?
So PRS was started with a very simple idea, right, of supporting parliamentarians with legislative research. It's called PRS Legislative Research, right? I think they started with Parliamentary Research Services, or something happened and they couldn't do it. So then it's PRS Legislative Research, something like that. Um, I'll just give you like an overall picture of why they exist, right, rather than what, and then we'll get to what they do. So in our Indian Parliament, we have about 750 odd MPs, both in Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. They come from various diverse backgrounds, right? Something like what I did, right, which is a commerce graduate getting into Parliament, something like that. Farmers, non-lawyers. I'm talking about specifically people who do not understand the law or can't even read it. Businessmen, businesswomen, business people in general, lots of them. What happens is they win elections, right? They do the campaigning, the party helps them, they win elections, they get into parliament. But a lot of them are clueless about what to do after that, or how to be effective as MPs. Understanding parliamentary processes is a whole different ball game. There are rules you have to follow, questions you have to file, what is the format of the questions. You can file notices to do interventions. You can file amendments to bills, right, where you're actually participating in lawmaking. You can file private members bills. All of these things are very overwhelming, right, for someone who just gets into parliament. And I'm not just talking about a legislative aid, I'm also talking about MPs in general. So they get somewhat of a training from the Lok Sabha Secretariat as well. They have like these workshops, etc., to help them figure out what to do in parliament. But at the same time, nuances of bills are very difficult to understand whenever legislation comes in. Because legislative, if you look at, like, let's say something like an RTI, right? RTI has a giant history. So if you bring in an amendment today on RTI, either you spend a lot of time reading about the RTI, what the history is, how effective it has been, what are the problems, etc., or you depend on someone who already knows it. So PRS is full of people who know these things, right? So they are researchers, primarily policy researchers. They have been following sector-wise legislation. And whenever a bill comes up, they do these bill briefing sessions when they started out, where MPs come in and they're briefed about these bills. Now, the PRS line is very straight. They help you analyze the bills. They don't give you a stand. They don't tell you whether you should be pro or against. They will point out both advantages and disadvantages and give like a very cut and dry brief, right? To help you understand what the legislation is. So, what happened after that was that MPs were saying, listen, we get that you are giving us all this analysis, but please help us make us an informed opinion as well, right? If I'm taking a pro stand, you should be telling me, okay, so these are the things you should use in favor, right? If I'm taking a anti stand, right, you should help me figure that out. That PRS couldn't do because they were super unbiased, and that is why they're effective as well, right? Because they're serving across party lines. So Lamp Fellowship was a small germination of an idea which was about giving MPs legislative aids, right? So they're strictly not being controlled by PRS or anything of that sort, but they are also assisting the MP form these arguments. So there is basic knowledge of policy analysis, but what LAMP offers are these young, curious, smart people, 50 people across the country who are randomly assigned to MPs across the board. They go to their offices, they sit there, they analyze the bills, they give the briefings. But then there, the MP tells them, okay, so this is the stand I want to take. Now help me draft a speech.
Oh, so you
Right?
don't get to choose what MP
No, you
no?
don't. It's randomly assigned. I had no clue who I was being assigned to the day they assigned me, an hour before, literally. Right? So it again, that's the thing. They train you to be extremely analytical. They train you to be extremely, I know neutral is a very heavy word, but more or less look at pros and cons of all things, prepare a brief, analyze the bill, and then give it to an MP. Right? The tailoring is done afterwards, which is the MPs taking the decisions on top of it, whether they want to support it or not.
And all of this they did within like a month of training, which is
Yes, it's quite nutty. I know, and the thing is that I realized that even after the training, even after a year in Parliament, actually 3 years in Parliament, I still was a little clueless about what was happening. I've worked with MPs for 7 years. After that, right? I mean, like from 2011 till 2018, like post 2017, right? Um, when I was working with MPs, on a day-to-day basis, I was learning more. So it was like an education for me by itself, just on the job education, right? I was going through all the bills that came into Parliament. I was analyzing them. I was helping them do sectoral research according to their interests. And I've worked with multiple MPs, not just one, and from different regions in India. So very diverse amount of issues, from railways to education to even local issues, right? Something that comes up in the news, how do you react to it? If you have to go on a TV channel, what sort of research do you need for that? If you're going on an event and you have to prepare a speech, then what all inputs go in there? So all of this sort of plethora of work started following after that. Then I also got into a little bit of political work, right? I was working in Sikkim, where I was actively involved with the party there and helping them draft communications for them, taking stands, strategizing, all those things. So it like over a period of time, I feel like I got an education more or less in the Indian democratic system. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this makes me wonder how people used to do this before PRS came. And I kind of have an idea. It used to be that the party would assign some secretary who is
Hmm.
like a mid-level party worker, or they'll have their pota poti, or whoever to give them instructions. And And I think PRS sort of brought in some level of professionalism. Is that fair to say?
I would say yes, but also to like also emphasize that our MPs don't really need to know all of these things, unfortunately, because of this law called anti-defection. We have a law called anti-defection, which does two things. One is, of course, if you get a party ticket and you win from there, and you are in parliament representing that party, you cannot quit. You cannot switch parties, right? If you switch parties, then you get disqualified. That's anti-defection. That ensures government stability, essentially. The second thing it does is that it has a provision that the party leadership can issue a whip on the MPs. And whip is not the same that is according to the American system, right? Our whip is an order which which sort of forces you to vote in one way or another. So the party leadership will decide, okay, so this is bill is coming in, say yes, vote yes. So all the people will turn up in a block and they will vote yes, right? If they vote no, they get kicked out of parliament or a legislative assembly, right? So essentially, an MP is not giving really any contribution per se, because the party leadership has already taken the call whether to support it or not. All they have to do is go in and give a speech, right? And then they can say whatever they want, essentially, right? So there is no real emphasis on actual policy making from an individual MP's perspective, because they're just seat fillers for the party, numbers, essentially. So that is the sad reality of it. But at the same time, there are, of course, MPs who do want to do this. There are MPs who do want to participate in legislation and want to make a difference or want to effectively make policy. These are the kind of MPs who essentially need aides. They need research staff. They need research people, because then they want to put in the effort to have an informed opinion, right? And I wouldn't like make a blanket statement that all of our MPs are like this or not like this. Of course, there are very degrees of how they want to be effective. So in that case, you need an entire staff. So where does the staff come from? Right? The parliament gives you like some 35,000 rupees a month to hire all staff, which includes cooks, drivers, everything. PAs. Yeah. PAs are very important for appointment keeping. So all the money gets exhausted there. So only a rich MP can actually afford to keep a staff. Right. And they have to spend from pocket, or the party has to make a research wing, and then the money will come from there to pay people who are actually worthy. Right. Like if you hire a lawyer, even if it's like a lawyer with like 2 3 years of experience to be full time in your office, that will cost you like an easy 50K, and MPs, like that's like 6 lakh a year, right? And MP salary will get exhausted that way, half of it at least. So how do you do it, right? So that's why PRS also came in, which is, we are giving it to you for free, right? Our legislative aides are being paid by us. They are just in your office helping you, right? Plus, we are doing these briefings for free. We are not charging you for this. So that's where the void came in, where they were actually taking away a lot of burden of legislative research from the MP's offices. Yeah.
And during your work with so many MPs in so many different states, how was your experience? Were they taking you seriously? Given the fact that at the time you were just fresh out of college or
Yeah.
just fresh out of training, were did they give you an ear on of your?
No, mostly. In the beginning, it's very hard to gain the trust of a politician. Like, I mean, that's like the most obvious statement I'll make on this podcast, I guess. But it's very hard also because they already have their trusted people around them. They already have like people who have been working for years. And ye kaun londa aa gaya? 21-year-old, 22-year-old.
On that note, I mean, trust is one, and there's this popular notion that numbers don't lie. So, do they ask for numbers or data backing
Yes.
it? Yeah.
So the thing is that the way we were trained, we give it by default, right? I mean, all the decisions have to be analytical and made using data and evidence that you can find and give to the MP. So that was like just part of the training, right? The thing is that like when you get into an MP's office, as a 22-year-old, which I was, fresh, out of college, very young, I had no clue. And these people are like veterans, like 10 years, 20 years in politics, maybe second term MPs, third term MPs I've worked with. They already know what's up. Yeah, they know how to be effective and not to be effective, where they want to put in the effort. So why would they take me seriously? So we have to sit down with them and also identify the void that they feel in their office, right? And the usually the largest void is legislative research. So that is where we come in. So we don't give opinions, right? We are nobody to give you opinions. They won't even listen to any opinion we give. So what's the point? Our job is to give them research, right? And they have to make the opinions on top of it, and we have to validate those using the research. So once that got clear, once that relationship is established, where this guy is not coming to give me advice, he's coming to give me research, right? Like factual data, pulling things out of the internet and providing it to me in a 14-point speech format, right? Then the trust is established, right? A lot of MPs, I think now know this, but back when we started, a lot of MPs did not have clarity on this also. So it was a bit of a struggle in the first few years, to be perfectly honest, to convince them about what my point is of existence. Why do I exist in their lives? And I mean, threw us into a lot of existential crisis moments also, where the boss is not listening to you. They're just like distracted by something else, not giving you face time. A lot of MPs, when they come to Delhi, they would give you 15 minutes. Then you don't see them for 3 months, right? And it's that bad sometimes. So how do you still be effective, right? Even if you don't get FaceTime, how do you make sure your work reaches them? So then you work with the PA or the other people and then try to navigate through that. So yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, was that one of the reasons why you quit or had a move on? Or
To into content making and journalism. Yeah,
no, first journalism. We'll come to the
was
content making
journalism.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Not really. Actually, I was really enjoying it. What was happening? I was working with Tathagat Satpathy. He's the editor of two newspapers in Odisha. Third time MP, very senior MP. Um, and I worked with him for 3 years, and we formed a very good relationship. Like, as in, he was the chief whip of the party, and the anti-defection. So we wrote the messages to come and vote. Plus, he was also in charge of essentially assigning speeches to people. Like, you talk on this legislation, you talk on this legislation, right? So he's the whip. So what happened is our office sort of eventually turned into like a research wing for the party, where some MPs would request, "Oh, I will talk on this, but can your people help me out?" So I was the chief of staff. I had two other people working with me, so we would help other MPs in BJD also with speeches, understanding bills, going to them, giving them briefs, all the things, right? Um, he also gave me a lot of freedom otherwise to experiment with his political image. And like we did Reddit AMAs, which nobody had ever done. We got him on Twitter. We did some shenanigans on Twitter and TV news and all the things. He was very open to sort of experimenting in the political space. um, and even with speech writing, how to turn the speeches into YouTube clips, all the things, right? So he was very open to that. So that happened, but then what happened is I started to build my own profile on the side, and he was okay with it. Like, I was just tweeting essentially. I was an insider in parliament who was telling you what is happening. So I started being very active on Twitter, got a lot of attention. And then I started writing posts on Reddit India anonymously called Last Week in Parliament, where I was just covering what happened in Parliament in a very fun, casual way. Newslaundry saw that, they picked me up, said that you do a column for us. And then I was doing it. And all this time I was working with Tathagat Satpathy, right? And they knew, like, there was a disclaimer that he works with an MP. Uh, so one of my articles goes viral. It was on the finance bill,
No
where
conflict of
they
interest in the process.
So that's the thing. So I had told Newslaundry that I work with this MP, and they said, listen, we'll give a proper disclaimer, etc. And of course, their editors were there, right? And I was very open about it. Tathagat was very open about it, so there was no secret,
Oh, lovely.
right? And he was actually very encouraging also, which is like, oh no, you like to write, right? So you should have your own writings published somewhere, and you should go out there and talk about these things, because he also understood. So there was an understanding formed between us that, listen, both of us are working in different capacities in the parliament, right? And our whole and sole objective is to get issues across and be like reasonable and try to convince people about what is the right way according to what we think, right? It's very obvious that's what an MP is supposed to do, right? Once that understanding is formed, I was helping him with parliament. He was also helping me like write better, do all the other things. So he was a mentor, right? In a way. And again, he gave me freedom. So the thing is that one of my articles, which I had written on the finance bill, went quite kind of nuts, right? It was basically I wrote about the electoral bonds, how it was brought in, what is the shadiness inside the finance bill, all the things. So then that made him a little uncomfortable. I mean, things got a little uncomfortable after that, where, I mean, once it goes viral, right, it seems like, oh, is your office giving this opinion? Right, which was a clear distinction we had in our heads, like both of us, that no, I'm my own person,
And
he's his
also,
own
people
person.
will feed to him, right? Hey, this
Yeah,
guy from your office is writing this, and maybe he
yeah.
has this intention and whatnot. Yeah.
Essentially that is what happened. And fair enough, I mean, it was and no hard feelings towards anyone about them. But then he told me, listen, I think you have to make a choice. You can either do journalism or you can continue working with me. And he was okay with both of them, right? And he was like, look, you are your own person, you decide what is your interest. I went to Newslaundry, I pitched a show, which is Consti-tution. They were very open to it. So I told him, and he's like, go right ahead. You separate. And then from there, I started, sort of, I wouldn't say journalism to begin with. It was more commentary. I still think I was making content first. Then I moved into journalism, and now I'm making content again. We'll come to that.
Yeah. So, and then you moved to IVM podcasts.
Yeah.
What were you doing over there?
So, uh, I mean, Newslaundry was very interesting, right? Because they got this nobody on a show, right? I had no hosting skills, I had no scripting skills. Abhinandan sort of took me through all of that. Like lots of retakes, and even now when I look at my 2017 avatar, I'm like, yaar, kitne basic mistakes ho rahe hain yahan pe. Now I know that. But back then I was like this very excitedly doing Constitution, explaining people what it means, what speakers are, how parliament works, all the things. Season 2 also I did, which was basically about your rights, what is reservation, what is free speech, all the things. Um, so it was a little bit of a strange thing for me. I had never expected my life to take this turn, and I just went into it. Got decent amount of traction. I was primarily writing. A lot of my pieces went viral during that time. Then I started covering elections for Newslaundry, going to states, covering protests, like farm protests, etc. So I was doing ground reporting for a few years, like 2 years. Um, and after that, it just got a little too much. Like the toxicity really got to me after a point, and it was very hard. It was very grueling. Plus, due to like some personal reasons, I had to move on. But move on in the sense I still didn't want to leave content creation, and I always wanted to explore long form content. Newslaundry, all said and done, is short form content, right? 20-minute, 30-minute episodes, whatever. I really wanted to do podcasts. I wanted to do long form podcasts. So I asked IVM and they were very happy. So then I was creative director nonfiction there for a year and a half.
Again, you
I've quit
just
now.
pitched an idea to IVM. Was that the
So the thing
process?
is that they already followed my work. I had already done a podcast with them otherwise called How to Citizen. They really liked it. It did well. So then they were like, listen, come in and, you can basically handle the non-fiction division creatively and editorially. So I came in and I was helping them, like make their shows better, like an internal consultant of sorts, right? And also doing my own shows on the side. So yeah, that's how IVM happened. And then I quit, which is like a month ago. It ended. Yeah.
Okay. So all these transitions that you made, it was never for monetary things. It was just
Uh,
interest, or you just came to know of it by chance, and then you transitioned. Was money ever a factor?
Not really until I think IVM a little bit, but mostly no, because so the thing is that I feel like if my basic needs are met and I'm living a comfortable life, I'm okay. Like as long as I'm doing what I'm enjoying, I feel like and getting paid for it, of course. But it's not like a large amount of pay that I require, right? I feel like if I never go after money per se. Like it's just not me. I sort of want to let the money come. Like I'm doing something, if I'm creating value in society, that will be rewarded, right? And I trust the market and society enough to judge me by the value that I offer and then sort of compensate me for it, right? So then it's as easy as that. And interestingly enough, now that you ask this question, YouTube is teaching me this, like big time, right? It's a very I cannot explain how difficult it was for me to quit IVM, which was paying me a decent amount, and start my YouTube, because it is a very scary thing to be independent and also depend on the, like, literally the goodness of your audience to sustain you. I'm very pleasantly surprised in the last 1 month by how much potential like there is, right? And people are actually like becoming members to my channel. They're actively giving money, right? Of course, advertising is one thing, but they're watching my stuff. They're supporting it. They're on live streams, right?
And
250
advertising is
people.
also pretty tricky, right? Because it also depends on the content that you post,
Yeah,
and advertisers can be
yeah,
like, hey, you are not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do that. So that can be a
yep.
bit limiting, I guess.
And that's why the YouTube model, I think, is the best for someone like me, which is like ads are coming, but they don't care about the content. Like they just care about the views, right? So if your content is going viral, or if it's getting a certain amount of views, it'll show ads anyway, right? And doesn't matter. They're like, and the ads are dynamic, right? So one ad you will see now, next time you open the video, you'll see something else. Then you'll see something else. So nobody has to take responsibility for each other essentially, right? So it's a great model sort of for creators like me.
Yeah, basically the algorithm takes care of it. So
Yeah, algorithm takes care of it. Yeah.
yeah, before we move on to other topics, I just want to ask one little thing. So, if let's say someone wants to be a legislative researcher or wants to work under an MP, you had the umbrella of PRS, so to say, because it was easy for them to reach out to MPs on your behalf or whatever, right? But let's say if someone is independent, they do have an interest in civics. What are some of the ways where they can be what you did for the MPs?
It's very interesting. My initial answer used to be, do a policy course or do like go to a PRS, do a lamp fellowship or something of that sort. I have changed my view over time because I was also handling staff after a point. And I was like, there were all these young people who came in and they were like, listen, can we intern with you? Right? In our office, right? And they just walked in. Some of
Just
them just
ah,
walked in. Yeah. They were like, can we meet the MP or their staff? And then they walked in. And the thing is, it's like I had now a friend, ex-colleague who came from the gaming industry, right? He was a gamer, right? And he was very into politics and he really wanted to sort of work and see what it's like. So it was completely driven by curiosity, right? And he came to us, he contacted me through like a forum or whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, he's coming to Delhi. So it's like, I want to meet you. So he came in and he's like, listen, is it possible for me to work here? I really want to learn. And then I was like, okay, so what do you offer? He says, yeah, I can write. Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. He's like, do you know the news? Like, he's like, yeah, I follow the news very actively. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's figure out. right? So then he got trained in the office then, which is by like doing, and menial tasks, right? Which is like ticket booking, going to parliament, filing the questions on to the desk, talking to bureaucrats about certain things, sending letters, starts from there, right? And that is also a part of the training, because that is a very important part of the MP's functioning. So I've had people who came into office and they were very cool with doing all of these things, right? But at the same time, they were like, "Acha, but can I also help you with a speech? Can I help you do research for this and that?" Right? So I would say that if you are a young person today, find MPs. I feel like most MPs would be very open to taking smart young people in and training them, right? Training them in the sense, don't expect pay. That is a big thing, at least initially, until you gain their trust, right? Once you gain their trust, they will pay you. They are not like, once they see your value, they will compensate it. So and also don't pick popular MPs, pick non-popular ones. Non-popular ones really need the help, right? So there is a void in their life, there is a void in your life, just match it together. and but it has to be relentless, right? MPs don't have time. You need an elevator pitch about why you are important and what value you will add in their lives, right? Go prepared, look at their speeches, look at everything they did, and then also figure out why you want to specifically work with them, right? How do your interests align? Are there particular sectors that align? So you go prepared, but then you get like hardly 10 minutes with them. You have to impress them, get in. And once you get in, you can stay, right? You can work, you can stay.
Yeah, one of the things with this is that popular MPs are easily reachable, while the others are
Yeah.
not easily reachable. So that I guess people just have to figure that
I
out.
mean, you go to the Lok Sabha website, Rajya Sabha website, all the office details, phone numbers are there. Take an appointment, figure it out. I
Oh,
mean, you might have to come to Delhi, or if the MP is from your city and they have an office there, go to that office.
fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, that's really helpful for young people who want to be in this space.